Look at her. She's plain, drab, and frankly, too ugly to be the face of the Baker legacy. Stephen's voice, amplified by the
wife is too ugly to be your wife!
System, sliced through Pachelbel's cannon like a knife through silk, freezing me and 500 guests mid-breath at the altar that was supposed to seal our forever. I'm Michelle Shaw, 28, and I was standing in a $15,000 Vera Wang gown that Tuesday afternoon in September when my groom decided to announce to the world that I wasn't attractive enough to be his wife. The kind of announcement that happens when your fiancé mistakes his wireless lapel mic for a private conversation with his best man. Except Stephen wasn't talking privately at all. He was performing for the cameras he'd personally hired to live stream our union to his 2 million Instagram followers. Before we continue with the story, be sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Oh, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. We love seeing that Stephen stood at the altar looking like every finance bro's fever dream in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. The $8,000 suit I'd quietly arranged for him through my family's personal tailor, because he'd mentioned his credit cards were temporarily maxed from the business expansion. He was completely unaware that the microphone pinned to his lapel was broadcasting every word to the crystal-clear speakers positioned throughout the ballroom. "Honestly, Marcus," Stephen said to his best man, loud enough for the front 3 rows to hear clearly, "I've been rethinking this whole thing. Michelle's great for now, loyal, supportive, doesn't ask too many questions about where the money comes from. But long-term, I need someone who actually looks the part for a billionaire's wife." Marcus tried to signal him to stop talking, eyes wide with panic, but Stephen was on a roll. "I mean, look at what she does with herself. No makeup artist, no personal trainer, just plain. My investors expect me to show up to galas with a showstopper, not someone who looks like she teaches elementary school." He gestured toward me dismissively while adjusting his diamond cufflinks, the ones I'd given him for his birthday last month, purchased with what he assumed was my event planning salary. The irony would have been hilarious if it weren't currently destroying me in front of everyone I knew. The woman he was calling too plain had been single-handedly bankrolling his entire lifestyle for the past 2 years while he built his self-made empire on loans, credit, and one very strategic merger he thought made him untouchable. My maid of honor, Christina, noticed first. Her face shifted from joyful to horrified in half a second. But instead of warning Stephen, she just stood frozen, bouquet trembling in her hands, like she was watching a train derail in slow motion. "The Shaw International deal closed yesterday," Stephen continued, oblivious to the ripple of shock spreading through the crowd. "I'm finally operating on a real billionaire's level now. I can't have a wife who looks like she shops at outlet malls. My brand needs an upgrade." Guests were turning to each other, whispering, pulling out phones. The videographer, who I'd paid $12,000 to capture our special day, kept his camera rolling, capturing every second of my public humiliation in 4K. Stephen's mother covered her mouth. My father, seated in the front row in his understated navy suit, didn't move a muscle. But I saw his jaw tighten in that particular way that meant someone's world was about to end. And it wasn't going to be mine. Let me take you back to how we got here. Because the foundation of this catastrophe was laid carefully over 2 years of tests, lies, and a family secret I'd kept hidden for one specific reason. I met Stephen at a tech networking event in 2023. He was magnetic, polished, talking confidently about his growing software company and his vision to disrupt the digital marketing space. I was impressed by his ambition, his charm, his apparent success. What I didn't know then was that his thriving company was hemorrhaging cash. His office was a WeWork hot desk. and his confidence was built entirely on venture capital he was weeks away from losing. Those early months felt like a fairy tale. Stephen planned romantic dates at exclusive restaurants, surprised me with weekend getaways, made me feel like I was the center of his universe. When he mentioned temporary liquidity issues during a crucial business phase, helping felt natural. Just short-term, he promised, just until the next funding round closed. The temporary help became my full-time job. It started small, dinner here, his rent there, a car payment when his accountant made an error. "I'll pay you back when the Series A comes through," he'd say, kissing my forehead. Then it was the penthouse lease I co-signed, the luxury car I financed, the country club membership I gifted him for networking. I never told him who I really was. Michelle Shaw, only daughter of Richard Shaw, founder and CEO of Shaw International, the $40 billion conglomerate that owns everything from luxury hotels to semiconductor manufacturers to, as of yesterday, the controlling stake in Stephen's independent company. I'd spent my entire life watching men fall in love with my father's bank account instead of me. So I used my mother's maiden name professionally, took a legitimate job at a boutique event firm, lived modestly in a brownstone I actually owned but pretended to rent. I wanted to find someone who loved Michelle, the person, not Michelle, the heiress. Stephen wasn't supposed to be a test that he'd fail this spectacularly. But as I stood at that altar, listening to him calculate my value like a depreciating asset, I felt something shift. The hurt was there, sharp and cold. But underneath it was something harder, clearer, the absolute certainty that the man who just called me too ugly for his fake empire was about to learn exactly who owned the stage he was performing on. Stephen proposed on a Thursday night that smelled like truffle oil and rain. We were at Le Chandelier, the kind of restaurant that serves food on plates so white you feel guilty touching them. Candlelight softened his sharp features as he pushed a velvet ring box across the table, his hand pretending not to tremble. For a heartbeat, I saw the version of him I'd fallen for. Earnest, hopeful, a man who looked at me like I was the missing piece of his future. Then he launched into a speech about timing, branding, and striking while the iron is hot for his public image. And the glass slipper I'd been trying on since our first date gave its first, barely audible crack. He thought my last name was Hayes, my job a mid-level event planner at a boutique firm. He knew I came from a good family, that my dad was comfortable, that my apartment had crown molding and a doorman. He didn't know the brownstone was mine outright. He didn't know the good family was the Shaw dynasty, with a holdings portfolio that quietly underpinned half the city's skyline. That ignorance wasn't an accident. A year earlier, when we'd started seeing each other regularly, my father had asked, in his measured way, if I wanted the usual due diligence done on Stephen. Background checks, credit reports, quiet inquiries at his firm. I'd said no. If I was ever going to trust a man, I needed to know how he treated me when he thought I was ordinary. So I switched to my mother's maiden name and let Stephen assume my money matched my modest wardrobe instead of my private banking statements. The test started simply. I never offered details about my family, and when he pressed, I gave him carefully curated half-truths. Old money, small circle. Dad invested in some things, nothing dramatic. Stephen nodded, pretended not to care, then casually asked what kind of safety net I had if my little events slowed down. I noticed the way his eyes sharpened, not in love, but in calculation. By the time he slipped that pear-shaped diamond on my finger, sourced through a Shaw-owned jeweler he'd bragged about negotiating down, I knew exactly what he was marrying. He thought it was potential access, leverage, an upgrade someday. And tonight, At the altar, when he called me too ugly for his legacy, the test he never knew he was taking shattered around him like crystal. The ballroom staff dimmed the lights on schedule, as if nothing catastrophic had happened at the altar 30 minutes earlier. The crystal chandeliers glowed warm and honeyed over tables dressed in white linen and orchids, each place card still printed with Mr. and Mrs. Stephen Baker in looping gold script. A DJ cleared his throat over the microphone, voice wobbling as he announced the bridal party that no longer existed. Guests pretended not to stare at me as I walked in alone, bouquetless, my veil gone, my face carefully blank. Stephen arrived 10 minutes later, not with shame, but with a +1. She stepped in on his arm like she owned the room. Tall, bronzed, the kind of beauty that photographs even better than it looks in person. Her dress clung like a second skin, slit high enough to belong on a red carpet, not at the reception of the woman he'd just humiliated. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. Someone dropped a champagne flute that shattered against the marble, sharp and bright. "Everyone," Stephen called out, drunk on attention and the illusion of power. "This is Alessia." He squeezed her waist, pulling her closer. A real partner for where I'm headed. My name was still on the ice sculpture melting in the center of the room. Alicia smiled with practiced boredom, blinking slowly at the sea of stunned faces. I recognized her from a luxury swimwear campaign I'd seen plastered across a Shaw-owned hotel. My family's logo had been lit behind her for months. She just didn't know the woman standing across the room in a ruined wedding dress signed the approvals for that ad buy. I felt movement at my left shoulder before I heard my father's voice. "Do not leave," he murmured, the words a command, not a request. "Watch." He stood half in shadow near a column, tie loosened, expression unreadable. Only the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth betrayed anything. A tiny, dangerous tick I'd seen in boardrooms right before someone's portfolio evaporated. Stephen led Alessia from table to table, introducing her to the very people who'd watched him call me ugly minutes earlier. He laughed too loudly, over-explaining, making jokes about chemistry and upgrades that landed like lead. Some guests forced smiles. Others suddenly remembered early flights. My father's eyes never left him. "When you're done bleeding, we'll begin," Dad said quietly. He just told the world what he values. Now we show him what we own. Across the room, Stephen raised a stolen champagne flute like a toast. For the first time all night, I almost smiled. The reception from hell had just become Exhibit A. The veil came off in a bathroom that smelled like peonies and panic. I shut the door on the muffled music and distant clink of glassware and stared at myself in the mirror. Mascara intact. Lipstick steady. The only visible damage was the lace veil pinned into my hair like a symbol of a woman who didn't exist anymore. I reached up, unhooked the comb, and pulled it free. The delicate netting fell into my hands, suddenly weightless, suddenly irrelevant. Without it, my face looked sharper. Not prettier, not uglier, just honest. The woman who'd stood at the altar hoping Stephen would choose her was gone. The woman looking back at me knew exactly what she was about to do. My phone buzzed on the marble counter. Notifications stacked like falling dominoes. Texts from friends, missed calls from vendors, a news alert about shocking wedding walkout from tech golden boy Stephen Baker. The live stream had done its job. The world was already watching. I opened my contacts and scrolled past Stephen, past Christina, past florist, emergency, until I reached a number labeled simply Shaw Legal. My thumb hovered for a second. This was the line I'd promised myself I'd never cross, the wall between my life and my father's empire. Between Michelle, the ordinary fiancée, and Michelle Shaw, sole heir. The call connected on the first ring. Shaw International, General Counsel's office, a calm voice answered. This is Emily. It's Michelle, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, quiet but edged in steel. I need to speak to my father's team, full confidentiality. There was the briefest pause. Of course, Miss Shaw. One moment. A soft click, then the low murmur of a secured conference line. I pictured them in the glass-walled war room on the 42nd floor. Files, tablets, projections of acquisition targets glowing on screens. Men and women who'd dismantled corporations for sport. Michelle? Came a familiar baritone. Harold, my father's lead attorney. We're here. Your father asked us to be on standby. Of course he had. I looked at my reflection one last time, at the gown, the bare head, the eyes that were finally done pretending. Harold, I said, each word precise, deliberate, irrevocable. Execute the Baker buyout. Silence. Then the rustle of papers, the shift of power beginning. As you wish, Miss Shaw, he replied. Effective immediately. Stephen swaggered down the hallway like a man who just escaped a life sentence instead of a wedding. The penthouse floor of the Aurora residences was quiet, the kind of rich, padded silence that came from triple-pane glass and neighbors who signed NDAs with their leases. His laughter still clung to him from the club. Alessia's perfume on his collar, the echo of his friend's congratulations. Dodged a bullet, Marcus had said, clapping him on the back. On to bigger and better. He stopped in front of the black lacquered door of 72A, the $20 million testament to his self-proclaimed genius. Floor-to-ceiling windows, private elevator, concierge who greeted him by name. He'd paraded it all over social media as proof of his ascent. He pressed his thumb to the biometric pad, already picturing the city view, the decanter of whiskey on the bar, Alessia barefoot on his marble floors. The lock flashed red. He frowned, wiped his thumb on his jacket, and tried again. Thumb pressed, hold. Wait for the soft click he'd heard 1,000 times. Red. A tight laugh slipped out. Seriously? He jabbed the pad harder, as if force could scare it into cooperation. The panel stayed stubbornly crimson, then displayed a message he'd never seen before. Access denied. Contact management. Annoyance flared, hot and incredulous. He'd tipped the building manager $5,000 at Christmas. He paid obscene rent for this place. Well, Michelle did, but the checks had his signature. He yanked his phone from his pocket, thumb already moving to call the front desk. No service. He stared at the screen, then at the phone, like one of them had betrayed him. The upper corner where his carrier logo usually sat was blank. No bars. No LTE. Nothing. Okay, what the... The elevator behind him dinged softly. Stephen turned, ready to unload on whoever stepped out. Instead, Samir, the night concierge, approached with a careful politeness reserved for rich people and rabid dogs. Mr. Baker, he said, stopping a respectful distance away. Good evening. Stephen gestured at the door. There's a problem with the lock. My thumbprint isn't registering. Get maintenance up here, now. Samir's eyes flicked to the panel, then back to Stephen. There's no malfunction, sir. Then open it, Stephen snapped. You know who I am. Yes, sir, Samir said quietly. That's why I'm here. He unfolded an envelope from his hand, heavy cream paper embossed with a logo Stephen recognized from the merger documents. Shaw International. You've been served notice. Effective as of 11:59 p.m. All leases and assets held under Baker Digital Holdings are subject to emergency review. and have been temporarily seized pending internal audit. Stephen stared at the logo, cold creeping under his skin. This is my apartment. Samir didn't flinch. According to the updated ownership records, Mr. Baker, this apartment belongs to Shaw International. He inclined his head with something almost like sympathy. And you no longer have authorized access. The jewelry store smelled like polished wood, money, and fear. Stephen mistook the last one for excitement. He walked in with Alessia on his arm, sunglasses still on, despite the soft boutique lighting. Glass cases glittered with diamonds arranged like constellations, each stone a promise of status. Alessia tilted her head toward a display near the back, all effortless grace and trained indifference, the way women do when they know they're expected to be impressed but never surprised. Something timeless, Stephen told the sales associate, a woman in a sleek black dress with a name tag that read, Claire. Classic cut, but not basic. Price isn't an issue. Claire's smile sharpened by a millimeter. Of course, sir. Are we thinking engagement, anniversary, or apology? Alessia laughed, low and pleased. Upgrade, she said. They settled on a cushion-cut diamond in a platinum setting, the kind of ring that photographed well and cost more than most people's cars. Claire placed it on a velvet tray for one last look, turned it under the light, then slid the tray toward Stephen. An excellent choice. How would you like to pay? He pulled out his favorite black corporate card, the one that had opened doors and conversations for the last year. The logo for Baker Digital gleamed in the corner. He set it on the counter with a little flick, like punctuation. Claire ran it. The machine beeped. She frowned slightly, tried again. Beep. She glanced at the screen, then at him, professional calm slipping just enough to show a crack. I'm sorry, sir, she said. The card's been declined. Stephen smirked. Run it again. The limit's 8 figures. She did. Same beep, same message. This time she read it twice. It's coming up as reported stolen. That's impossible, he snapped. It's my company card. According to the processor, it belongs to Shaw International Holdings, Claire said carefully. They flagged all activity and requested we retain the card if presented. Heat crawled up his neck. Fine. Use this one. He handed over his personal titanium card, the one with his name etched so deep you could feel the letters. Claire swiped, waited. Her expression shifted from concern to something like pity. I'm afraid this one is declined as well, she said quietly. The bank notes all accounts associated with you are temporarily frozen pending an internal audit initiated by Shaw International. Behind him, Alessia's fingers slipped from the crook of his arm. Is there another method of payment? Claire asked. For the first time since the wedding, Stephen had no answer. The ring between them sparkled under the lights, perfectly still, already beyond his reach. The video didn't start with my face. It started with my name. Who is Michelle Shaw, really? The on-screen text asked. White letters over a slowed, muted clip of Stephen at the altar calling me too ugly for his legacy. Then the angle cut sharply, and the world saw me in a way Stephen never had. Stepping out of a black car onto a red carpet, draped in a midnight blue gown that fit like it had been sewn onto my skin, diamonds winking at my throat like tiny stars. The footage was from a charity gala 6 months earlier, one of those quiet power events where cameras were discouraged, but never fully banned. In the video, I laughed with a senator, clasped hands with the director of an international relief fund, leaned close to an aging media mogul as he kissed my cheek. The Shaw International logo glowed behind us on a step and repeat. a watermark of ownership no one who mattered could miss. Average? Read the next caption. Too plain? It replayed Stephen's words in big block quotes while clips of me circulated, taking the stage to announce a $50 million education initiative. Shaking hands with CEOs, the crowd rising to its feet as I left the podium. In every frame, I looked like what I was. Poised, confident, expensive. Someone had edited it with surgical precision. The first half was pure humiliation. Stephen's voice, my still form at the altar, guests staring. The second half was revelation. The transition between them went viral in under an hour. A smash cut from, "She's just not the right look for where I'm going," to me standing between my father and a foreign prime minister, flashbulbs exploding. Comments flooded in before I even knew the video existed. Wait, that's the same woman? She's the heir to what? How did he call her ugly with that hairline? News outlets grabbed the clip, slowed it down, circled my last name on a gala program in red. Financial blogs pulled merger documents and traced ownership lines straight from Stephen's company to Shaw International's labyrinth of subsidiaries. Suddenly, my mystery wasn't whether I was pretty enough for his brand. It was why a woman who clearly had one of her own had ever been standing beside him in the first place. I watched the video in my office at Shaw headquarters. City lights spread beneath the glass like circuitry. The world was finally asking the right question. Who is Michelle Shaw, really? They were about to find out. Stephen had always loved glass buildings. He used to say they made the city look like it was made of possibility. Every reflection, another version of himself waiting to be discovered. As he stood on the sidewalk outside Shaw International's headquarters, neck craned to take in 48 stories of mirrored steel, the only reflection he saw was a man who suddenly needed saving. The security officer at the front desk looked up as he approached. "Appointment?" she asked. "I'm Stephen Baker," he said, impatience already riding his voice. "CEO of Baker Digital. I need to speak with Richard Shaw or someone from his executive team. It's urgent." Her eyes flicked to her screen, then to him. Something like recognition passed over her face, followed by a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Mr. Baker. You're expected. Take elevator A to 42, the boardroom." Expected. The word soothed him. Finally, he thought. Someone who understood what he was worth. The elevator opened directly into a corridor lined with smoked glass and abstract art. At the end of it, double doors stood wide, revealing a room he'd only seen in magazines. Sleek conference table, city sprawling beneath a wall of windows, leather chairs occupied by men and women in tailored suits. Power didn't just hum here, it vibrated. "Mr. Baker," a familiar baritone greeted. Harold, the general counsel, rose from his seat. "Have a seat." Stephen launched into his pitch before he sat. Frozen accounts, mistaken audits, a hack on his corporate cards, how the press was circling. "Look, I get that there's been some confusion," he said, spreading his hands. "But the merger between Baker Digital and Shaw International." "Acquisition," Harold murmured. Stephen blinked. "Merger," he repeated, forcing a smile. "Strategic partnership. Whatever term you prefer, the point is, we're on the same side. I just need the audit lifted, funds released, and we can all move forward." A chair at the head of the table turned. "Mergers imply equality, Stephen," Michelle said, crossing one leg over the other. "You were never my equal." For a second, he didn't recognize her. No lace, no softness. She wore a charcoal suit that fit like a decision and a silk blouse the color of storm clouds. Her hair was sleek, makeup precise, every line of her body relaxed in a way he'd never seen. The only familiar thing was her eyes, and even they had changed. The warmth was gone. What remained was cold, lucid assessment. He laughed too loudly. "Michelle, what are you doing here?" "This is my office," she said simply. "You're sitting at my table." He glanced at Harold, then at the others. No one looked surprised. "That's cute," he tried. "You're, interning here now? Helping Daddy clean up the mess?" A subtle murmur moved around the room, like someone had dropped a pebble into deep water. Michelle tilted her head. "Stephen, you signed a stack of documents you didn't bother to read," she said. "The Shaw International merger you bragged about? You sold controlling interest in Baker Digital for 30% above its inflated valuation. In exchange, you ceded voting rights, asset control, and golden parachute clauses you assumed were in your favor." "That's not possible," he snapped. "My lawyers reported to Harold," she cut in, "whose firm is retained by Shaw International. Conflict of interest clauses were waived by you personally. Page 6, paragraph 3 of the agreement." Harold slid a copy of the contract across the table. Yellow tabs marked dense sections of text. Stephen stared at his own signature, looped and confident, on the last page. "You can't just take my company," he said, the words cracking. "This is my life's work." Michelle's gaze didn't waver. "You didn't build a company, Stephen. You built a brand around yourself and financed it with other people's money. My family's money now owns it. All of it." He opened his mouth, closed it. "So why am I here?" "Courtesy," she said. "Most people find out they've been removed as CEO via email. I thought, given our history, you deserved to hear it in person." A folder slid toward him. Termination, NDA, severance that wouldn't cover a month of his old lifestyle. "You called me too ugly to be the face of your legacy," Michelle said softly. "You don't have a legacy anymore. You have a non-compete and a 30-day window to vacate all properties bearing the Baker name." The room was silent. Outside, the city glittered, indifferent. Stephen looked from the contract to her, finally seeing the one truth that mattered. He'd never been the one holding the power. She had, all along. By the time the segment aired, Stephen had already muted every group chat he was in. He sat on the edge of a borrowed bed in a friend's spare room, watching a financial news anchor dissect his life in a tone usually reserved for weather updates. On the side of the screen, a red ticker flashed. Baker Digital founder wiped out in surprise takeover. Underneath, a neat little graphic showed his estimated net worth, sliding down to a clean, merciless zero. They even used his favorite photo, the one from a magazine profile where he stood in front of the Aurora penthouse windows, arms folded, city behind him like a conquered kingdom. The lower third read, "From Tech Golden Boy to Dispossessed." His phone buzzed once on the nightstand. It was Alessia. He stared at the preview, just saw the news, and opened it, pride shriveling under something heavier. There were several messages, stacked neatly the way his notifications used to be when deals closed and congratulations poured in. "Just saw the news. You should have told me things were this bad. I can't be attached to this kind of drama. My agency is freaking out. I hope you land on your feet, but I have to protect my brand." Then, one final text, the kill shot. "You're not the lifestyle you sold me, Stephen. This isn't what I signed up for." He read it twice, the words a perfect echo of his own voice. At 100 dinners, a dozen bars, 3 years of conversations he thought no one was really listening to. She'd attached a screenshot of the news segment. A freeze frame of his face, eyes half closed mid-blink, under a headline about reckless spending and questionable leadership. Under that, one more line. Returning the bracelet tomorrow. They said the card company wants it back anyway. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer. He tapped out a reply. We can fix this. It's temporary. Shaw is overreacting. But the message hung under a single gray word. Delivered. No typing dots appeared. No three bubbles, no laugh, no eye-roll emoji. Another notification popped up from a gossip account he used to love when it wasn't about him. Side-by-side photos. Stephen and Alessia at a launch party, all teeth and champagne. Alessia alone that afternoon, tagged in a story at a beach resort with a caption, New Beginnings. The comments rolled in fast. She upgraded. He finally met his own criteria. Guess net worth really was the only thing he had going. For the first time, it occurred to him that maybe this was all he'd ever taught anyone to see. The papers were thicker than they needed to be, a small, petty luxury of the legal world. They lay in a neat stack on the polished walnut table of my new office. The city spread out beyond the glass like an empire rendered in light and steel. One set bore my married name. The other bore his. Last chance to change your mind, Harold said, though his tone made it clear he already knew my answer. I picked up the pen. The divorce decree sat on top, all tidy language and numbered clauses reducing 3 years of my life to bullet points. Irreconcilable differences. No children, no shared property that hadn't already been repossessed or reassigned. Stephen's signature already bled across the bottom, a tight, angry scrawl. I signed my name beneath his, each loop of the letters a small reclamation. The bankruptcy documents came next. Baker Digital Holdings, Baker Lifestyle Media, Baker Ventures, a constellation of shells collapsing in on themselves. Where his name once read CEO and founder, a new line had been typed. Former controlling officer. Effective immediately, Harold said, gathering the pages. He'll be notified when the court stamp is recorded. You won't have to see him again. That was the point. I stepped out onto the balcony, the door whispering shut behind me. Wind tugged at my hair, cool and clean this high up. From here, Aurora Residences was just another shard of glass in the skyline, its glossy perfection hiding the empty space where his life used to be. Somewhere inside one of those smaller buildings, Stephen was learning how it felt to be ordinary, without a safety net. My reflection hovered faintly in the window. No veil, no trembling smile, no man at my side to validate my existence. Just a woman in a tailored suit, sleeves rolled to the wrist, the weight of a global corporation resting easily on her shoulders. My phone buzzed once. A news alert. Shaw Iris ends marriage to disgraced tech founder, assumes full control of merged empire. The article photo showed me from the gala video, mid-laugh, the headline trying to decide whether I was villain or heroine. For the first time in a long time, I didn't care. Beauty had always been the metric everyone else tried to use against me. Too plain, too understated. Not enough of a spectacle to hang a man's ego on. Out here, above the chatter, I finally understood the quiet, vicious truth my father had lived by his whole life. Power was the only kind of beauty that didn't fade when someone stopped looking at you. I rested my hands on the cool metal railing, the city humming below like a living thing that answered to my name now, and let that truth settle into my bones. Michelle Shaw, not someone's wife, not someone's upgrade or placeholder, just the woman who owned the throne. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.